Learning How approached me about coming to the conference. I volunteered. They didn't ask. I said, look, as long as you've got me and I'm coming of this very short distance from California, and you've got me in the room, if you would like, I would be very happy to do a follow-on. Often in the large group plenary, folks have questions. They don't want to walk up to the mic. And either they have questions, they want to have a comment, they want to tell the keynote speaker you don't know what you're talking about, but they want to do it in a smaller form, and that's fair game too. So it really is an open forum as much of your conversation with one another. I'm here to facilitate or entertain, but I didn't do a very good job of entertaining in the last one. All the jokes that worked with other groups didn't. Yeah, but still, even by those standards, this is a tough group. We've sort of done real quick introductions. Why don't we take another, just very quickly, your name and your campus so we can get it all on tape. We'll pass the mic. You're up.
Oh. Jack Williams.
Is that on? Turn it on helps. Okay.
Jack Williams.
It's on. He's recording. Are you getting Jack?
I'm not.
Let's see. Well, this end is on, so it's problems at your end. It's always the technology.
Okay, can you talk?
Jack? All right.
Jack Williams, Sinte Gillespie University.
Great. That's all we need at this point. That we will do a voice check.
Carol Bunch, Hannibal LaGrange University.
Great.
Cindy Sadler, The Learning House.
I'm not sure this is working. Wolfgang Natter.
This is like bride and groom. Who did we offend? You guys want to come over here and we can make it easier or not? It's like not everybody gets an aisle seat, folks. It's okay. But there's still plenty of open seats.
I'm John Ernstberger from LaGrange College.
Okay. Great.
My name is Victoria Walker from Midway College.
Great, thank you.
I'm Ryan Ladner. I'm from Bryan College.
Bruce Gillies from California Lutheran University.
And
I'm Amber Whitley from Beckfield College
Great.
in Kentucky.
So again, open game, open target. Oh, one last one. Do you have a pink slip? You're late. Come on down. It's okay. We're just do very quickly name, rank, and serial number.
Anthony Nichols, Shoulder University.
I'm sorry?
Anthony Nichols, Shoulder University.
Okay, great, thank you. Open forum for each other or for me or at me, depending. It's okay to say I.
You need to use the microphone.
Yeah, well, let's pass the mic. So who's holding the mic? Great. It's not so much for us, it's for the people at home when they stream this.
Casey, you mentioned a couple of times WCET. Can you explain for those of us who are a little bit ignorant about that?
Sure, I'm sorry. Yeah, so WCET is used to be the Western Consortium for Educational Telecommunications. It is an operational group of WICHE, the Western Interstate Commission on Higher Education, a compact of, I think, 11 or 12 Western states that does stuff like cross credits and other stuff. They had a telecommunications component some years ago. It has been renamed the WICHE Consortium for Educational Technology, doing a lot of stuff in the area of online and distance learning, a number of research projects, best tools and collaborative projects and guidelines, a really rich resource. The website is WCET Info. A lot of really good stuff. We were collaborating with them trying to do an online, the survey, some of the data I showed, there seemed to be a need for data asking the folks responsible for online education, help us understand. We were not trying to duplicate the stuff that Sloan has done very well about enrollments and other issues, but looking at a lot of the planning and policy issues, barriers to expansion, how are you doing assessment and evaluation, what are you doing about training? And so that's where some of that data came from, but there's a lot of really good stuff. They have an annual conference end of October, early November, that kind of rotates between Northern, Southern California, other states, and Denver. Okay? Strongly recommend a lot of the work that they do. Please.
Just a first question about the Campus Computing Center. Sure. How long have you been doing this, and how many years of data, in other words, are you able to draw upon?
Yeah. So campus computing is the largest our tagline. It's the largest continuing study of IT in American higher education. Our tagline is everybody else has opinions, we bring data. It was designed as a or I'm the one-eyed guy with glaucoma in the land of the blind, which follows the everybody else has opinions, we bring data. It was launched in 1990 in the wake of the arrival of microcomputers as a benchmarking project for colleges and universities to say, what are you doing about IT planning? Focused initially on the academic side and scholarship. As the technology evolved, as issues got porous, you couldn't separate, is your network, is your portal an administrative or an academic resource? We've moved into some other areas. Each year, about 500 campuses across the country participate in our annual survey. We look at a lot of planning and policy issues. So we don't do much on budgets. EDUCAUSE has done that with their core data. We don't ask, for example, who is your administrative systems provider? We were the first to ask about LMS and providers. We have great data, for example, about going mobile. We have great data about are you in the cloud? We have a lot of data about, does your campus do this? Are you looking at these issues? There's a lot of stuff on my website, shameless self-promotion, campuscomputing.net. There's videos, there's conference presentations, there's PDF files. And if you're the IT officer, we would welcome your participation, or know the IT officer. It's an open call. We don't post the questionnaire online as an open call. We want the senior campus IT officer. Project was launched in 1990, so we're on our 23rd survey this fall. And we do the survey in the fall. It's a forward-leaning indicator in the sense that we're asking questions in August and September about where are you going, as opposed to where have you been, in terms of thinking about planning and policy issues. Have you activated, will you activate these kinds of resources, services, programs? It's the methodology that none of us learn in graduate school, but all of us deal with in the real world, and that is it's the Gretzky rule. For those of you who play ice hockey or think about Gretzky, he said he skated to where the puck was going, not to where it is. I think that's a great metaphor for understanding technology. So, please.
Can I ask a follow-up question?
Can you ask a follow-up question?
Yes.
Okay. Are you guys with the Brooms family? Did we offend you? Okay.
Some of the major institutions that have recently banded together into
Yeah.
a consortium, have any of them consulted with you? And more broadly, going from that, I'd be really curious on your thoughts about what long-term you think some of the ramifications of that is going to be.
Okay. So when you ask about major institutions, are you talking about the MOOC movement?
Yeah.
And EDX, MIT's Open Courseware Exchange, and the others? Some of those folks look at my stuff. Many of them live, honestly, in a world that's so rarefied it doesn't make a difference. They do what they damn well please, because they can. A lot of our work is really more used by others, other than the elite 20, the elite 30. One of the things I tell we have some 40 corporate sponsors who pay a modest subscription fee to help support the work of campus computing, but when they come into the higher ed market, what I tell folks is Harvard is a terrible reference account, because there's only 20 places like Harvard. Where you really want to be is at Mass Bay Community College or institutions like yours, because there's a lot more of them. And higher ed, as many of you know, you don't care about Harvard, you care about campuses like yours. And the other thing about higher education is, while we compete for students, once the students are in the door, we conspire against our providers in many ways. I mean, if you think about the conversations that many of you will have here, or when you post to the network, or you to a CIO list or some kind of other listserv, or when you talk with colleagues or pick up the phone, for the technology providers that service the higher education market, this is like being a blackjack dealer where everybody at the table is not only counting cards but sharing their card counts. Because the culture of higher education is one of collaboration. So yes, we will compete intensively to get students, and I may lose one and you'll get one and I'll get another one, or 5 or 6 out of high schools or from employers or anything else. Once that's done, we are far more porous about our conversations about what we're doing well and how to share that than you see in any other market sector. Please.
I have a question to tag on to what you said a moment ago about we're moving to where the puck is actually going. So what do you see, where is the puck of online education going? What do we need to hold on to our seat belts or our seats with, or where are we going?
Okay. So where are we going? In kind of random order, we're going a couple places. We're going in a world of high public expectations. By accident, perhaps, maybe not. In the span of 2 weeks, both David Brooks, the conservative columnist at the New York Times, and Tom Friedman, the liberal columnist at the New York Times, both wrote very prominent articles effectively supporting online education. Friedman was a bit more expansive, Brooks a little more cautiously optimistic. There's some evidence to suggest that those columns may have been a catalyst for a little bit of what happened at the coup, the on-again, off-again coup of President Sullivan at Virginia. But it raised the public conversation yet again about online ed. So that's one issue. There's a set of expectations. This is going to happen, and I believe it will. I think there's a set of expectations that we have to ask. That part of what I tried to address in my presentation is content's the easy part. Honestly, content is the easy part. You know, the mantra of the internet has been content is king. Well, that's not true in education. Assessment, outcomes are king. Content we can do easy. And yet, both on campus and off, I think that there has been, and this goes back to the last cycle during the dot-com era, an assumption on the part of some folks on campus, many folks off campus, including internet entrepreneurs. We saw it in the last cycle, and we're seeing some of it now, that syllabi servers and people in front of screens, we used to call them eyeballs in the vernacular of the dot-com, make for a business plan, and they don't. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of instructional development. You just can't throw stuff up on a screen and expect it to work for students, for institutions. The thing that we do a terrible job that's really important is beyond the kind of learning assessment. We're clueless, and that's a carefully chosen term. We are absolutely clueless about costs and cost accounting. You know, oh, we're going to put up an online course, great. Well, we've got some folks in instructional design. We'll take their time to do this for the course that we're doing in the business program. We got to put some people that are doing support services help desk. Yeah, we've got them. They don't cost us anything. And so too often, too many campuses, we think we're making money. What we know is we're getting tuition. You know, whether we're actually making money, if that's one of the goals, which may or may not be. It may or may not be. When I talked earlier about congruence, but there's the expectation that it's easy, expedient, and profitable. It's not. And part of that data, using data as a resource, not as a weapon, is not just the learning outcomes, but it's the accounting issue. Where we're going is the changing landscape for faculty. You know, again, if you look at faculty historically, none of us knew how to do this. Our younger colleagues may know how. Some do it very well, some of them may not. But it certainly wasn't part of the apprentice experience that folks my age had, who are middle age and leaning older. And often it's an imposed requirement on some of our younger colleagues. Well, they get it. They're the technology folks who may or may not get it, who may or may not want to do it, who, like the rest of us, need some support, design development, because we don't do code. That becomes part of an issue. We need to have a candid conversation, as I said earlier, between faculty who, as a group, as you saw from the data, are leery and have more fear than excitement, and administrators who have more excitement than fear. And bring these folks together for a very candid conversation. How do we do this at Acme College, as opposed to prescribing it or mandating it or leaving it to the early adopters? I absolutely remain convinced that the well-intentioned strategy early in the technology era, late 80s, early 90s, of supporting the early adopters and they will infect everybody else, failed. Because too often the early adopters intimidated as opposed to positively infected. I'm not like Susan. Paul is different. Even if they are my colleague, my friend, they are next door to my office. They just do it differently. They have or don't have the interest, the patience, the inclination, or show me why this makes a difference. Show me that this stuff, and we have not had the evidence. I mean, if you think broadly about the claims that have been made for technology and education, not just in the last couple of decades, but historically. And if you were to say, okay, let's put those claims up against the same kinds of testing requirements the Food and Drug Administration requires for new drugs and new medical interventions. We have failed. We don't have pharmaceutical quality evidence. You know, we drive a lot of this by epiphany and intent and opinion as opposed to evidence. And no wonder many faculty say, I'm not going to play. It's a huge hole on my time. The stuff keeps changing. I've got other things I have to keep current with. Why do I want to do this? Where's my instructional support? I get no credit for it. Just to go on for a moment, I do a lot of, and I say this respectfully, but a little bit flippantly, I do a lot of show and tell days, or I used to. Show and tell days when the faculty who got, the dozen faculty who got instructional development or summer grants to do something for their course with technology, get to parade that in front of their college. So I come in and I'm the keynote speaker. Dr. Green's here to tell us about national trends, coffee break, and either in breakout sessions or in front of everybody else. They all get a Warhol unit, 15 minutes. Psychologists, physicists, philosophers, and points in between. Each one gets 15 minutes to talk about what they did to do something with technology in their course. And they pretty much have to work on a common guideline. Tell us what the goal was, tell us what you tried to build, and show us what you did, and then end by answering a couple of questions. Did it work? What did you learn? What could you do better? Where would you go with this? And invariably, the last couple of minutes of that sound like a Greek chorus, one after the other. We learned a lot. We got about 85% done of what we'd hoped to do. We made a couple of missteps on coding or design. We screwed up on some stuff. We're getting students seem to like it. We think it's pretty effective based on the way we used to try to teach this material. I've got some colleagues at other campuses who like this stuff a lot and are already encouraging me by sending me notes about what to do in the next build on this thing. I am forever indebted to Steve, occasionally Susan. Susan or Steve are the work-study student or the graduate student who are the indentured servants who really did the coding for the faculty member to make, or design work to make this thing work. And the final line is, to my departmental colleagues, remember this day I know I've fallen on my digital sword because it doesn't count when I come up for review and promotion. And I'm adamant about part of making the world safe for faculty is it's not the edicts of presidents and provosts who say we are going to be technology oriented or we're going to leverage technology. It's the choices and the behaviors of department chairs. We eat our young, and we can't do that on this thing anymore. We've been collecting data for more than a decade from CIOs. Has your campus expanded review and promotion for faculty to include, for those who choose to do so, some component that allows recognition of if they go into the technology domain for their instructional work? And even at campuses that have an overwhelmingly explicit teaching mission, even at the small number of campuses that have one-to-one computer programs, there's only a small number that do that for their undergraduates. The numbers are 20 or 30%. So, we expect people to do that, and yet, honestly, we screw them over when it comes to review and promotion at too many campuses. And it's not the edicts of presidents and provosts, it's the behavior and leadership of department chairs and deans, who ultimately change some of this. Let me stop there. I've rambled on. Do you want to follow up on that?
Well, I do actually. Just to rephrase it a little bit, what do you see as the typical classroom in 10 years? And however you define classroom, a prophetic utterance.
So there's no typical classroom in 10 years. Peter Drucker famously said in 1997, higher education is in great crisis. We're currently pushing out more material. He was really talking about broadcast. It was one of his last interviews at Forbes. Today's campus is hopelessly unsuited for the needs of higher education. Costs are rampant. You could dust that off, it applies today. And yet, rhetorically, and I do this still, I can throw the Drucker quote up on the screen and say, great, where does Drucker want his great-grandchildren to go to college on the trust fund? University of Phoenix, meaning the 18-year-olds. Some campuses exclusively online, or the high-touch places where he taught during his professional career. Bennington, which is one of the ultimate high-touch places, New York University or the Claremont Graduate University. And it's contextual. It's absolutely contextual. These are not black and white. These are points on a continuum. And we're going to have to sort of match and align individual needs and institutional offerings. I would not want to take an organic chemistry course online. My guess is, although there's no way to necessarily tag that on a transcript, a lot of medical schools would not look favorably if you got an A in an online organic chemistry for people who want to be physicians, because historically organic chemistry is a huge hurdle on the way to qualifying yourself to apply to med school. On the other hand, there's a lot of stuff you might, and until particularly we get these quality issues sorted out, and the assumption is it's easier or it's not as good or anything else, people are going to, it's like running water. It's going to find its own path. And some institutions are going to make that part of their mission. Some institutions are going to make that an explicit part of their program. There is no one classroom of the future. There's going to be a lot of technology, and I think ultimately along the way what we're striving for is tech-enabled high touch, and there's lots of different ways that that's going to play out. That may be tech-enabled high touch on the other side of a screen. That may be tech-enabled high touch in terms of the flipped classroom. But we've always had the flipped classroom. Those of you who went to large universities, the flipped classroom was the seminar you had with the graduate student after the faculty member's lecture. So you went to the large lecture with 300 or 400 students, and then you sat with the graduate student to discuss the stuff. That's a flipped classroom. There's not that much that's new under the sun. The content can be very different. We have far richer resources. How many of you ever took statistics as undergraduates? Okay, so those of you who have gray or thinning hair like me, when I took stat, we never worked with numbers. It was all about theories, because you couldn't run any data. Yeah, and so at least what I remember about my undergraduate experience with statistics, the only numbers we really looked at were go do a quick survey of your friends about bathroom parking or food service, and you drew histograms. Today, now, while you're sitting here, you can go to any one of a number of public websites for states, for government agencies, for foundations. You can download incredibly rich data sets in education, healthcare, voting behavior, corporate financials, student educational outcomes. You can pour it into Excel or a number, and you can look at the permutations. You can work with real data. You can get your hands on that stuff. And that's a far better instructional learning experience than trying to figure out the sort of the proof of theorems in terms of understanding statistics. So I think we're going to see richer content, absolutely. But the continuum is still going to be there. Please. And you've got to find the context to your institution and your clientele. Please.
Well, just kind of along the same lines as your question is, I'm just curious, do you see a time in the future where the number of online enrollments will surpass the number of on-ground enrollments?
Not in
And
my,
when
that-
might that
yeah,
be?
not in my lifetime. Because I think, again, higher education in this country has been wonderfully expansive and incredibly porous. We made a policy choice in the United States. Between 1957 and the National Defense Education Act, Sputnik went up, new math came down, education for national defense. We got it in Cold War, beat the Ruskies. The preamble to the National Defense Education Act said, let all who are able, we will marshal talent in defense of the nation. The 1965 Higher Education Opportunity Act, the preamble says, let all who are able. And that shift from the meritocracy, I'm sorry, not from all who might benefit, all who are able to, shifted in Higher Education Opportunity Act to all who might benefit. And that shift from marshaling the meritocracy to beat the Ruskies, I'm rendering that down, but that's sort of what it said, to all who are able to use education was a huge policy shift. And you can, and it's had incredible ramifications in terms of financial aid. Part of this was leveraged because of the impact of the GI Bill and what that did for a generation of returning service members after the Second World War and the educational opportunity and the catalyst that that provided. We're going to offer, again, a huge array of opportunities at different points along the continuum. Community colleges aren't going to go away. Elite high-touch institutions aren't going to go away. Online is just an extension of that or adding a dimensionality to it. I honestly, Harvard's not going away. Most of your institutions aren't going away. Honestly, in 1980, when we looked at the demographic downturn in the United States, which scared many of your institutions, I'm assuming most of you were at small private colleges, is that right? Yes? Small private colleges were most threatened by the demographic downturn of the 1980s. Baby boomers were done. High school graduation rates peaked at about 4 million in 1980, and there was going to be a 16% decline. And it was going to be hell in a handbasket. We had 3,000 students and 33,000 institutions and 12 million students, and all the forecasts based on the demographics, because it was largely first-time college students. We didn't have the adult populations that we have now. There was one anonymous analyst who was widely quoted in a lot of the stuff. 700 private liberal arts colleges are going to close. What happened between 1980 and 1994? We went from 3,000 to 3,600 institutions, many of them still private nonprofit. We had the beginnings of some of the for-profits. Enrollments went from 12 to 16 million. Not only was it the influx of adults, but even as we had a smaller cohort of 18-year-olds, we had a larger proportion of those going on to college. So it ain't going away. And as painful as it is to say this, for all the conversation we have about rising college costs, every 10 years there's a federal commission, like the Spellings Commission in 2006, the National Commission on College Costs in 1996, one in 1985, one in the 1970s, that have taken higher education to task appropriately about costs and efficiency and quality, and it just keeps ratcheting it on. There are consequences for individuals, there are consequences for institutions, but we have been surprisingly, in aggregate, immune to the ebb and flow of the marketplace and the ebb and flow of cost issues. I think some of that's going to change. The accountability tone, I think, is qualitatively different now than it was 10 years ago, when we always had these, we go through these cycles about quality. But on the other hand, how many of you were in the Southern Association of Colleges, SACS? It was 32 years ago that SACS became the first of the regionals that changed all the accreditation stuff, when it went from hardcore quantitative metrics to you have to look at outcomes. And for 32 years, beginning with SACS and moving into the others and then into some of the professional associations, we've had a conversation that has mandated outcomes but has provided no methodologies. So we have been through, for many of your institutions, 6 or 7 accrediting cycles over those 30 years, and we're still struggling to deal with the issue of what are the outcomes. And so we reach for proxies. NESE, if any of you are using National Assessment, that's a proxy. It's not an outcome metric. It's great data to feed into some outcome metrics, but it's but we hold it up. We hear our NESE scores. Our students are engaged. That doesn't tell you anything about an institutional impact on engagement, just as that your students are more engaged than others, but that may be a selection bias. So I'm rambling, but I don't see it changing that. We're just going to have this continuum. We may have more stratification along the continuum, but ultimately that's a good thing. I mean, people are investing in human capital. They go to Oprah's book club. That's a human capital investment. I'm going to benefit from that. The challenge with the MOOCs and this other stuff is how do you credentialize that? I can't take my Barnes & Noble club that's got an Oprah logo on it and say I'm a liberal arts major. And if you look at the early conversation about the MOOCs, they are candid that they haven't figured out the business plan. Do we charge, is it like a book? You charge people $10 and then they can take it and then maybe we can figure out some certification at the end? Are we doing a placement service? Or is it the kind of stuff that shows up at the bottom of the resume after your formal credentials? Yes, I completed 6 courses at Coursera on artificial intelligence and app design. We don't know. It's uncharted territory. The answers are too long. Please, can we pass you the mic? They want to get this for posterity.
I don't know why. Supposedly, we're supposed to be the one-eyed prophet in the land of the blind. But
Yep.
it was telling in your question about, I guess, 2 questions there. One, you asked the group how they thought their online program stacked against their traditional. A few said it was better. A few said it was equal. Then you asked the question, okay, if you had a child, would you ask them, would you recommend them go to online? Very few people, even those that had superior online programs, recommended their child to go. The question I'm asking, are we going to realize in a few years that online education is a correspondence course of the 21st century?
Will it be the correspondence course? I don't know. Because I think because online education has so many different permutations in terms of how it's done, how it's offered, the requirement for student engagement, the quality of the curriculum, and the requirement and whatever's done in an assessment. For some it will be, any more than walking in, again, let me extend the Oprah's book club metaphor, walking in and buying the collected work of Peter Drucker. Is that a good thing? Yeah, you're making an investment of time and human capital to understand management. Or reading the New York Times business bestsellers if you're in business and management. In theory, that's a good thing. But we don't have a good way to credentialize that. And the quality of that reading and by extension learning experience is as varied as the individual learners. How many of you have Kindles or one of the interesting things about the Amazon app these days, and also I think the iBooks app, is that now they're telling you how much of the book you've read. That's a really that's an in-your-face feedback mechanism. You bought something and it's sitting there. In the old days, many of us, certainly for myself, you'd go on the bookstore binge. That looks interesting, that looks good. And then you'd find yourself with $50, $75 worth of books, and you maybe get to 1 or 2 of them. And now, because it's so easy to download this stuff, oh, that looks interesting. I read that review. So, I'm not talking about 50 Shades of Grey. I'm talking about the good stuff. But it gets to be really interesting that now you've got a feedback mechanism that says, oh, I only read 30% of Drucker. I only read 45% of something. Now, did you lose interest? Did you fall off? Was it not useful? And you have to know. And in fact, it is a known fact because the Wall Street Journal reported it a couple weeks ago, that the publishers and the distributors, meaning Apple and Barnes & Noble and Amazon, are also looking at that data. They know where you've underlined. They know what words you've picked up in the dictionary. The Wall Street Journal article 2 weeks ago also said it's been that, particularly with romance novels, not that any of you would read that, but perhaps some of your friends might be interested in that. The feedback in terms of the interaction with content has helped to redesign some of the characters for the folks who have big franchises, in terms of the portrayal in the narrative about the hero or the heroine or the plot lines or some other stuff for the different segments of the romance. So you know what's going on elsewhere. Think about what that might mean in terms of the conversation we're having with our students and the movement towards digital curricular materials. We get some of that in the adaptive learning things. We know how much time students spend time on task with the LMS. What about if we started doing that with digital textbooks? Casey, you're not reading the textbook. You're not reading it fast enough. You're not reading it deep enough. You're not doing some of the exercises. That's a failure. I mean, that's both an intervention and an intrusion, depending on how you feel about it. Please.
Working in small private schools, One of the things that it seems that we must do certainly is to expand online where we have strengths in our existing programs. But can you tell me a little bit about the correlation? The birth rate's down, the number of adults seeking further certifications or degrees is, the pool has switched.
Yep.
Very much so.
Yeah.
Can you just speak to that and the correlations there with online? Because we have a lot of people in their 40s and 50s who are very technologically nervous, and so online may be an option for them on one hand, but they are so fearful of it. But I'm curious about this correlation between the traditional student and the non-traditional student and how this
the growth,
impacts.
for the most part, in online has been the quote-unquote non-traditional student. And again, this is part of what is my earlier presentation, talking about the infrastructure, the visualization. How do I prepare you? We do a little of that with full-time students orientation. We do very little of it, whether it's your technology portfolio or thinking about the path to whatever the outcome is. I think the other part also is, again, as higher education has gotten has become increasingly porous, large parts of the potential clientele, and Dave or Steve said something about this earlier in the presentation that preceded mine, they don't want a degree. They need a course. They need a certificate. They need something to say, I went to Acme College, I got content, I got certification, and I can walk into your office and say, in addition to my degree, or associate's degree, or bachelor's degree, whatever, I've taken some other stuff to enhance my portfolio. So Southern California, where I live, is an example. In the recession of the early 1990s, we lost 300,000 jobs in the aerospace industry and defense industries. Geographically, that's the area south of the LA airport, for those of you who have come to Los Angeles at any point in time, sort of the Long Beach, Orange County area. We added over 300,000 jobs in the entertainment industry, which is scattered, mobile, in terms of people in lots of different ways. A lot of those were technology jobs. And the folks who were in the DoD contracting industries, aerospace and DoD contracting, many of them had advanced degrees. They just had the wrong degrees for the changing time. They didn't want to go back to USC or UCLA or Cal State or some of the private schools to get another degree. They didn't have time, they didn't have money. The job market, they needed a couple of courses in something to update their portfolio. They went to community colleges. Community colleges had the curriculum for a lot of the technology stuff. There was convenience, whether it was on campus or the nascent online effort. This was before going online, obviously, but they could go at night. It was cost effective in terms of their investment of time and their investment of tuition. And they left with a credential, in some way it says a transcript that says I've enhanced my portfolio. I think that's part of the demographic we have to understand as well. I think it's a great feedback mechanism, for example, that I think Dave was talking about in his presentation earlier, to say that we've got some of this data that can help you compare against your counterparts. Those of you who use IPEDS data, you want to sort of look at the competition. Are you all familiar with IPEDS? So IPEDS records every degree from every college in the country except for 3. And those are the ones whose students don't take any student aid for philosophical reasons. Hillsdale College is an example of that in Michigan. I think Grove City is the second one. So if you want to map geographically who's offering certificates in what areas, you can use the IPEDS data to say, well, who's within 100 miles of us who's offering, doesn't tell you online or on campus, but who's got a healthcare certificate or a nursing certificate, and is that an opportunity against the strength of our program? We have made the opportunities are larger in one sense. It's not just college degree. The market is larger. In the downturn, we did a national survey of community college presidents in the wake of the downturn. The summary data is on my website. We saw explosive growth at community colleges and online programs. Cost, convenience, content, certification. So it's not just one versus the other. Does that help as an answer? Okay. I don't do 20-word answers very well. I'm sorry. And let me just add, I'm going to have to leave in 5 minutes, folks. I've got a plane at 5:15, so when that alarm goes off, I'm sorry. I'm going to have to cut this short. But
So real quick question. For those of us who are starting to look into the online learning for our colleges and whatnot, you said one thing that we have to overcome is the nervousness of faculty. What do we do to start?
My choice, it's a semantic issue. I would say you have to address, not blow through it, but you have to have frank and candid conversations with your faculty. I'm sorry, but go ahead.
I mean, are there key ideas that you point at to start alleviating this nervousness?
Well, I think I'll go back to part of the presentation. So the question is, if you're not doing this now, first, hopefully it's a transparent conversation. Why do you want to do this? Is this consistent with the institutional mission? Is this at the other extreme? I'm not saying that's the case, obviously, for your institution, I don't know, but some might, faculty might say, this is a desperation play. This is a currency play. The president, the provost are going to lead us into online education because they think it's easy and we will follow when there's a lot of revenue there, and may or may not understand it. And we saw a lot of this, quite honestly, a decade ago. At the turn of the century, when a lot of campuses sort of did their strategic plans, Acme College in the 21st century, Acme College 2010, you saw these things were just rife with references about how technology will transform Acme College. And a lot of it, obviously, was semantic. It was not substantive, because nothing much changed at Acme College. I believe very strongly that you've got to align this first and foremost to mission and ask in a very transparent, in a very public way, why are we doing this? What's the purpose of this? Who benefits? And again, for many faculty members, it has the potential to be an affront. It may be perceived as a desperation mode, particularly if you've been affected by declining or stagnant enrollments or downturns in some way or another. Oh, it's a quick and easy way for us to do revenue. It's not quick. It's not easy. There's a significant investment involved. It's not just a matter of moving a couple of people or cannibalizing a couple of resources. That's first. Second is the issue of where and how. If you look at the demography of online programs and online courses, not a lot of Latin and Greek. They go to the high traffic areas, either high enrollment, lower division undergraduate courses, or in terms of certificates and majors, business, allied health professions. Not engineering, but information technology, information systems, education. Those are high traffic areas at large, maybe not necessarily your institution. So how do we do that? Third, what resources do we need? What is it going to take for faculty who may be interested or are willing to at least engage the conversation to feel comfortable in this environment? Some may be already. How long will it take us to do this? What's the necessary infrastructure to support faculty and students? How do we do the recruitment process? How do we differentiate? It was the question I believe that you asked. How do we differentiate or be sure that we're not cannibalizing our on-campus versus our online program if in fact that's a concern, as faculty may feel? What am I getting for this? If I'm the faculty member and you're taking my intellectual property from my course that I've developed and you're asking me to do more, what's my benefit in terms of assistance, support, financial reward, relief time, other kinds of assistance? Who owns this, particularly if you're doing video, you're doing lecture capture of my stuff? Case in point about lecture capture, I heard a story not long ago about a community college that did contract work with a local employer. They put a lot of time, put a lot of effort with one of the faculty members in an applied area and did this 10-sequence course. And they used it for the college, but they also used it for the local firm. And about a year later, coming back at the end of the summer, the program coordinator happened to meet with John, the faculty member, said, John, I just want to let you know, the folks at Acme Widget, I use Acme Widget a lot as examples, but folks at Acme Widget are really delighted with the stuff that you did. John says you can't use it. Pardon me? John, you can't, it's great stuff, yeah? So help me understand, John, is it out of date? No. Is it ineffective? No, it's some of the best stuff I've ever done in my life. Is it an issue about money? No, you guys were very clear. It was a work-for-hire contract. You gave me a lot of assistance and support. I had a really good time doing it. It was great stuff. What's the problem, John? I don't understand. He said, well, the problem is I've lost 75 pounds. I'm going to be damned if I'm going to let you put my image up on screen the way I used to be as opposed to the way I am today. There are intangibles you can't imagine that you have to address that are part of this thing. Yep. That's my intangible. So, I mean, those are some of the issues that are part of this. And just, but ultimately I would say is get everybody in a room and tell them to leave their egos at the door, honestly. And have the candid conversation. And that's hard. That's really hard, particularly if there's been layoffs, if there's been a public conversation about financial challenges, if there's been external pressure. just say, we're going to create a safe place, okay? We're all going to sit here, let's talk and begin the conversation about mission as opposed to markets and money. I think if you start with mission, you're in much better ground. I'm sorry, folks, I got to run, otherwise I'm going to be here for 3 days. Thank you very much. And at the risk of shameless self-promotion, it's campuscomputing.net. A lot of these materials are up on my website. There's a lot of video, other stuff. And my presentation, Learning House will have my presentation that I think they're going to post or distribute the next day or so. Thank you. But the red dress will not be there. That never leaves my computer.